The information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as personal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional or expert in the relevant field for personalised advice tailored to your specific situation.
If we think about all good, successful relationships, and let's say business relationships, I think there's some fundamentals that are really important. So the communication. How do you communicate? Expectations. How do you have that dialogue? What are your non-negotiables? And importantly, what are your values? What are your business values and where there's alignment? Entering into any relationship where it's your client, you've worked with them, you obviously care for them deeply, you should always be asking those questions and looking to engage with your business partner. You should be doing your due diligence as well around who you're working with to make sure that they are who they say they are as well.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Wealth Guide sponsored by Ryker Capital. This episode is actually kind of a part two. We have a very, very special guest, and I'm not going to tease this anymore. I'm going to welcome Anja Pannek, who is CEO of the MFAA. Hi, Anja.
Hi, Tamara. Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, this is episode 2. So if you haven't watched the first episode where Anja was our special guest, I really would encourage you to dive into that and really get her wisdom from what deep experience in the industry, in the financial services industry, what went on in 2023, what's happening in 2024. So that definitely sets a really great foundation, and I really encourage you to watch that episode. What are we talking about today in this episode? We're really going to dive into that mortgage broker, mortgage broking business, financial advisor, financial planning practice relationship. What does it do for the businesses, and what is that end experience and outcome for the mutual clients? So that's what we're talking about today. Very excited to dive into it. I might start off with, well, first of all, Ryker Capital, let me introduce. We have on the couch as well, Principal and Senior Advisor, Mr. Ray Rechme.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you for having me.
Also from Ryker Capital, another Senior Advisor, Mr. Dean Dasuki. Hi, Dean.
Hi, Tamara. Thanks for having me.
Now, Ryker Capital, Ray and Dean, you guys have been working with mortgage brokers in a business partnership for years.
Yeah.
I know. Lots of different partnerships, and they've been really successful for both the businesses and for the clients as well. So I might start off with, I'll throw to you, Anja, from your experience and your wealth of experience in financial services, what is your perspective on that business relationship between brokers and financial advisors and the value there?
So I think the way that I would summarize it in terms of value is it's the value that's created for the client at the end of the day. You know, we live in a complex world. People go through various different stages in their lives. We might talk about this at some stage. Financial literacy is very low in Australia. We get busier as we get older. Although planning and mortgage broking are under two distinct regulatory regimes. Mm-hmm. You know, people don't think about their lives that way. What they think about is, how do I be, happy in retirement? How do I buy my first home? How do I build wealth through property? Mm-hmm. How do I protect myself? Like they don't sort of think about those in isolated ways. They think about that more in context of what they want in their life and where they are in their particular stage in their life. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, I think that's the beauty of experts and advisors coming together, people who have deep experience and who can offer solutions so basically people can achieve their dreams. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, the value of the relationship, it's the value that is created for the client at the end of the day.
You're absolutely spot on there, Anja. I think if you look at it from a customer's point of view, they never isolate those events to go, I need to go this for that person, or I've got to see a broker, or I've got to see a financial planner for that reason. When they come to a financial expert, they come with their hope. They're going, I need help with all of these above areas here. Please help me. Mm-hmm. And I think good practices that we work with sort of have worked out this ability to a T, where they've go, this is a seamless experience they create for the client. We're going, well, look, if this is your goals and objectives, let us help you achieve, whether it be tax planning, building wealth through property, through super, through tax minimization strategy, or through insurances. So we create this seamless experience working with brokers to go, well, how do we create this experience for a client? Well, they'll go, I've come to the right place. I can address all of my needs and goals and objectives here. Mm-hmm. And the great part is they're going to keep me accountable to go, I've done X, Y, and Z last year. I've achieved my goals. How do I achieve some of that next year?
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, definitely with a consumer hat on, because I'm not a professional in the industry. I'm not a broker and I'm not a financial advisor. I definitely don't think about that. So for example, it's kind of whatever stage of life I'm at and I have children, we think about all of our needs, and some of it is property. And even when you look at property, some of that is lifestyle and some of it is financial goals, even just related to property, and then everything else, combined. If we throw back to your members, Anja, in the association, are you finding in conversations with them when they're trying to deliver these outcomes for clients, do they start off with going, okay, this is the type of business I want to create and the services, and how do I solve for them? Or are they getting kind of having clients ask them for that? What kind of combination is that when members are trying to think about how to design a business and how to have relationships?
The answer to this question is yes, no, all and none of the above.
I'll let you break it down because you're the one talking to members. Break it down for us.
Yeah, so I think, I'll start with my own experience.
Okay.
So my mortgage broker is a financial advisor. So that's one example where there are some people in industry, who have opted to extend their qualifications, and that's part of the business proposition they set up. Often will come down to what their client proposition is.
Okay.
So I think when brokers start their business, having a very clearly defined client proposition, and it might actually start with first home owners, or I want to build a home. How do I get access as a first home builder along those lines? But the reality is, just as an individual's needs evolve, a broker's business often evolve, and their clients will effectively grow up financially.
Yeah.
They may get older, they may have children, and as the needs of their clients change, a broker is in a position of trust. And as in that position of trust, it's not unusual for clients to say, hold on a second, how do I go about doing this? Or how do I go about doing that? So I think that is where a broker will have, the opportunity to say, well, how do I then support the needs of my clients? It sits outside of credit assistance.
Yeah.
What sort of business partnership do I enter into?
Yeah.
How do I support the needs of those clients?
Yeah.
If I think about some of the really great relationships that I've seen with advisors and mortgage brokers working together, it is a very holistic approach to client needs.
Yeah.
And Ray, you've spoken about this. It is a holistic, sort of sitting down, understanding, because actually being able to provide holistic advice absent of understanding the debt needs of a client is sort of not getting the whole picture as well. So having an advisor and mortgage broker working together as well. So back to the original question, it will depend, I think, as the broker businesses evolve.
Yeah.
I think there's one other thing as well that it's worth calling out with brokers as they start their businesses, they grow them, they become very successful as well. Confidence is a really big factor. So I think it's confidence in terms of, one, identifying what the need is with their client.
Yeah.
Confidence in terms of having the conversation.
Yeah.
Because having a conversation and you actually don't know how to respond to a client's questions if it's outside of your remit,
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And then the third thing is actually having confidence and trust in your business partner if you're going to refer that client on to someone else.
Yeah.
Like how do you, having that, because as with advisors, mortgage brokers, that client experience is really, really
Absolutely.
important. And you want to ensure that as you give carriage of that client experience to a business partner, they're in line, there's an alignment of expectations and values as well, because you care about your client.
Absolutely. And I think that service metric's got to match up, hasn't it? I'm like, well, ultimately we are in the service industry. And I think that alignment piece of service from one side of this, from broking to financial planning, it's got to be a seamless experience.
Yeah,
and we sort of work with many of the mortgage brokers to go, whenever you partner up, to go, well, tell me about your client service experience as to what outcome do you want for your client?
Definitely.
And secondly, how do you service your client? Because we've got service standards, we will sort of, as soon as we have a missed call, we'll call the client in at 2 hours. But do you want the same approach for your clients?
Yeah, and it's talking about that. What you said, there was a lot actually to unpack in that statement as well. I wouldn't mind drilling into the concept that you brought up is how when you become mature, I guess it's experience, you've got the confidence, having the conversations. Do you mind if I drill into that with you, Dean, as well? Because I know you work with a lot of brokers in that when they've they've had certain conversations and they know that they can't come up with the solution, and they are then going over to you. So what kind of conversations are your broker partners having where a financial planner is actually the solution, and how does that kind of look?
Look, once again, we're all specialists within our field. So the thing is that when a client is asking us for example, like a broker, like I'll give you a bit of an example that I had a couple of days ago where a client currently, they were going through the client's assets, and obviously when they do the loan application, they ask about super. Right. And then through the conversation, the client was saying, look, I've got multiple super funds. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I don't know how much I have in each, and so on and so forth. So the client was starting to get overwhelmed with the fact of what it looked like. And then the mortgage broker then explained to the client, look, I can understand that this is how you're feeling. And then he explained to her that obviously myself as the advisor can actually help try and tailor a solution for it to put everything together, and just so that it's a lot easier and simple to use. But also at the same time as well, off the background of it as well, given that he's helping her at the moment now with securing her new property and the new debt and all that type of stuff, obviously creating a protection strategy, God forbid, if anything did happen to her, both her family and her young kids are protected as well. So once again, they both professions, they definitely always work hand in hand together.
And those come up naturally in the conversation of providing that. Yeah. And then it's a matter of discussing it and going, to your point, having a partner, and then how do you actually, at the right time, make sure the client's need is, because you don't want to disrupt what they're doing now or overwhelm a client, which speaks to process and client experience too.
But the other thing as well, Tamara, as well, especially us as advisors as well, like part of the things that we go through with our clients is things like their budget and their cash flow. So we try and understand and unpack what their mortgage looks like and what's the interest rate they're paying and what that looks like. And then given that obviously we've got a rough understanding of what rates are within the market as well, when we start to see that our clients could potentially be paying an extra 1% on the mortgage than what the competitive rate is, and that's a perfect opportunity for us to then give back to introduce
it to your broking partner.
Broker, because then once again we want to make our client get the most out of their current position. Then we always refer back to them.
But not only that, I'm like, when you look at their tax as to what tax they're paying, and when you sort of start working out some of the tax efficiencies for them to go, if they go to me going, Ray, my goal is to add another property in 5 years' time. Well, let's sit down, Mr. Client. Let's look through your tax strategies and how we can do that. How some of these tax saving mechanism and outcome will let you down the path of achieving a second property or third property, right? So those goals can then be sort of met. But the beauty of all of that part of the relationship is the advocacy. And I know we've sort of spoken about advocacy at MFAA level, but when you look at the client level, they have this aha moment going, I've come to this place where I've had a mortgage broker advisor sit down with me, work through my goals, work through everything that I should be thinking about. I've never had that experience somewhere else. And when people have that conversation at a barbecue or an event, they are talking about these stuff. They are talking about the experience that they've had going, I know my interest rate's gone up, but my mortgage broker and my advisor helped me through this. And that's a fantastic experience.
Well, I'm going to drill into goals and conversations and tie those two things together. Because I know when you and I were talking about before the podcast, just to have a chat about that, it's really the conversations that I'll ask it in a question. Are brokers starting to have, or have they been for a while, having goals, advice, or other kinds of outcomes in addition to getting a mortgage for a particular property? Is that the kind of conversation you were also speaking about the mature conversations?
So I think mortgage broking isn't a transactional industry. It's not a transactional business. This is an industry that's moved way beyond that.
Okay. Yep.
And I, if you go back to episode 1 of this podcast, you heard me talk about 70% of Australians choose to use a mortgage broker, and that's not coincidental, because that comes down to really understanding what do a mortgage broker's client, what does the client really want?
Yes.
What are they looking to achieve? The regulation, the consumer protections that consumers are afforded working with their mortgage broker, that very sort of needs-based analysis, that comes through in responsible lending, understanding the client's requirements, objectives, and importantly, through the mortgage broker recommending products that are in that client's best interests, which is another regulatory wrap and safeguard as well. So it is much more than the transaction. What we also find increasingly now in industry is intergenerational brokers. Brokers who have helped mum and dad get into their home many years ago.
Yes.
Yep.
And now what they're doing is they're helping, that couple's children get into their own home. And what they've also found is, maybe the parents went on, they have a business, they help with business needs. So they're seeing people across the whole course of their lives. So this is very much, I think, again, we talk about evolution of industry and evolution of broking businesses. Broking businesses are very much adapting as people's lives grow, change, become more complex, the whole cycle as well.
Well, maybe if I pick up from there, and Ray, you would have that experience. So I've gone and I've got a trusted broker, and I'm having these, goals, longer term types of conversations with the broker. The broker then is introducing me to you as a partner.
Yeah.
How are you segueing there? Like, what are you kind of having that conversation with the broker so you have an understanding? As you said, you don't want me telling her, I don't want to tell my story all over again from scratch.
Yeah.
How are you guys, how does that work?
So I think it works. I think firstly, when we establish a relationship with a mortgage broker, I think there's a bit of a trust factor there. You've sort of weighed in as to how do you want the client's circumstances or information to be passed on.
Right.
There's obviously a third party requirement where you go, well, okay, Mr. Client, do you give me consent to work with some of the business partners that we do work with?
Yeah.
So once we have that flow of information, we will either do a joint meeting.
Okay.
Depending on obviously what kind of advice structure, what complexities arise out of it. I'm like, one of the perfect example I can give with the intergenerational advice that obviously Anja spoke about was a client who is just about to sell their property to mum and dad. They're already receiving a Centrelink benefit payments and receiving that large amount of money to help out their kids. Now was going to see their Centrelink payments stop. Mum and dad are receiving in and around $52,000 in age pension. Now, just by them selling their house, now they've got this in excess of $1.9 million sitting in the bank account. The first thing Centrelink will go, sorry, mum and dad, there is no more age pension. Right. So in effect, then you sort of work through with the mortgage broker to go, what are some of the challenges we're going to face with that client?
Sure.
How are the mum and dad going to help them? So in this case, it was entering into a granny flat arrangement. So the mum and dad were going to buy a house with the kids with a granny flat arrangement. And then we had to sort of workshop going, well, how do we ensure that when they enter into this granny flat arrangement, not only their life interests are secured, because if something was to happen to the kids today, they've lost their house. So not only they don't have a roof on their head, so we had to ensure the kids were covered from a financial planning perspective with their insurances, and also then ensuring.
This is getting bigger than Ben Hur.
I know. But it just goes to show the complexities.
It does complex, yeah.
Because you've got mum and dad side where you've got Centrelink involved, kids side ensuring that obviously if you've got a granny flat arrangement, they're covered.
Yep.
So all these intricacies you had to sort of marry up and then provide advice, not only from a broking side, but also from a financial planning side.
Well, and that comes back to your comment earlier, Anja, where you have that, very competent, very business mature broker recognizing all of these things and then going, okay, well, we do, there needs to be another specialist involved in this. And then that very solid transfer of information.
And what we don't want brokers to do is obviously say the wrong things which implicate on clients' financial situation. Now, if something was to go bad, I think the first thing the clients will ever do is going, well, but you told me to do this, which has now led me to lose my parents' pension.
I think the important thing is understanding options.
Understanding options.
Yeah, I think whether you're working with your broker, you choose to work with a financial advisor. The first thing I think, if you're anyone, I can't provide advice. I'm not licensed. I just need to say that. But just speaking from my own personal experience and that of friends as well, I think it's always good to take the time to pause.
Yes.
And say, well, this is what I think I want to do. Hold on a second. There's bound to be some ramifications. Do I actually understand what they could be and then what options are in front of me? And then, that next question around, is there anything else I should be asking? And who should I be asking that from?
Yeah, that's good. Don't go into solution mode right away.
No.
You know what I mean? There always are going to be pros and cons, and that's where you will really have that. And you have that obligation from a broking perspective, legally, et cetera, and from a financial planning perspective, you need to know your clients.
Correct.
You need to understand what's appropriate for them, and it's really unpacking that. And as we said, sometimes you do need that other professional person discipline to tune into that. Let's go back to dating then. You know why I want to, what do I mean by dating? I need to go back because I feel like when you start, you have to first of all, I think we've clearly identified that it's advantageous, you're opening, Anja, to clients when you have potentially a really, really good, solid professional relationship between those two disciplines. Okay, well, let's go back to how are we establishing this, right? You know what I mean? That's what I like to call dating. You know, as with anything, it's a relationship, and you really want to start dating. What kind of, maybe what you've heard from members over the years, Anja, what is that kind of opening salvo when you're going, I think this might be a good relationship? What do you do to kind of do that dating? What is involved in the dating process to give you success?
Yes, I actually quite like the dating analogy. Yeah. It's got sort of some similarities.
Yeah.
I think if we think about all good, successful relationships, and let's say business relationships, I think there's some fundamentals that are really important. So the communication. How do you communicate? Expectations. How do you have that dialogue? What are your non-negotiables? And importantly, what are your values? Like, what are your business values and where there's alignment? Now, I think first up, entering into any relationship where it's your client, you've worked with them, you obviously care for them deeply, you should always be asking those questions and looking to engage with your business partner. You should be doing your due diligence as well around who you're working with to make sure that they are who they say they are as well. I think setting up some of those frameworks around how do we communicate, how do we refer clients? What's our customer engagement process? Who does what, when and how? What are the time frames as well? How do we deal to things when they don't go well overall?
That's very important, that one.
Right?
Because you don't think about that sometimes.
No. And even every month we'll sit down and we'll review the effectiveness of not necessarily the individual clients, our respective collective clients, but actually how's the relationship going? How are we working together? Looking at, is the client experience, which I'm really big on client experience because I think it really defines how successful a broker can be. It's those sort of moments of truth. Is it seamless? Is it predictable between myself and my business partner? Advisor, if I'm working with an advisor, who provides what informations, SLAs. Now, I sort of spoke about business relationships, and that's really broad, but I think all of these factors apply. And I've seen them apply very well with brokers working with advisors. But likewise, I've seen other instances where those relationships haven't gone well. And I think that's just we have to be honest. A lot of that comes down to not having clear communication, not stepping in when things aren't working. Having some of that agreement up front in terms of who does what. And because I'm the CEO of the MFAA, I just have to say as well, I think just having a really high regard to regulatory boundaries. Who does what, dealing to privacy, dealing to consent. If your business partner isn't licensed and they're referring a client, you can't get a name and number, you need the client, all those sorts of things.
You need the client permissions,
You need to be very clear around what you can and can't do under regulation. Have your referrer agreement, all those sort of registers in place. And we've got extensive guidelines for all our members around what to follow. So,
and to carry on from what Anja just said, yes, we actually do as a part of that preliminary check with each other. But not only that, I think taking that dating step further, you have to be working with each other. You have to be in each other's offices. Much like any kind of dating game, you get to know each other, and that takes time. And if you're working each other's offices, whether it be a day or 2 day, that helps you get an understanding of what each other is about, how that relationship works, what are your service standards, how do you treat your clients? Because I'm like, we are client obsessed, and whenever we sort of, not in a wrong way, but
why don't we call it client-centric instead of obsessed?
Well, client-centric in the sense we sort of like to help our clients, and we'll going, well, okay, these are some of the needs of a client. Have we done them? Have we met them? And we sort of follow up and check in with those clients on a regular basis. So that's where I was going with the client obsessed. But I think having those key metrics is very important. But when you get to work in each other's office, in each other's space, that's where you sort of take that to the next level. And when you work in a client's, as an example, I'm working in a mortgage broker's office where I'm going, he will run a situation going, well, Ray, this is Joe's position. What do you think? Do you think we'd be able to add value where we can help them minimize their tax? They're about to take on about $3 million of lending. What protection mechanism we should have? What should be the key paramounts should things go wrong?
So are you talking about a system or process or approach, I guess is probably better, where if you're in a mortgage broking office.
Yep, or vice versa.
Or vice versa. And
Yep.
the mortgage broker, say, is having a meeting with a client and something's come up, that lends an opportunity where if you're able to call you and have some discourse at that point.
Absolutely, and we would like to call it a professional interruption, and
Okay, yeah.
where they will sort of simply introduce us to go, well, look, we've got Ray here in the office today, and look, some of this part that I can't address is out of my scope of work. Well, Ray can address that with you, and we'll sort of help the clients through that part of the process. So again, gives the client a very seamless experience when it comes to lending or financial planning event.
I guess again, with a consumer hat on, if I was in an office and I was going to see my broker, might have talked about superannuation. The broker saying, hey, I've got my financial advisor, partner in the office. I'll check and see if he can have a chat. That for me would be, I guess for me, because I have the trust experience, which you brought up earlier with that broker. And I really trust that broker because gosh, he has or she has changed my life because I've got this home as well. Being in that office, that for me gives me that I already have that trust. And then you come in and have the conversation. And it is really, if it's done in a professional way in that we've talked about it, from an experience point of view, that's a natural segue to a subject matter expert that my trusted broker has a very solid relationship with. So I can see that as a consumer being very, very positive. And I don't have to kind of run around and find somebody else because I'm physically in that office as well. I know that we sometimes have our mortgage broking referral partners come to the financial planning office that I'm sitting in and I'm working in, and then having that introduction. So that's kind of what you're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. But it just sort of takes that dating experience a little bit further because what you're doing is you're trying to understand how each other work.
You can see that you're picking up the culture when you're sitting in their space, right? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Culture, values.
Yes.
How you treat your client, how you service your clients.
How you treat your staff.
Yeah, exactly.
How you operate.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And,
so it's all of the above. You get to understanding going, does my values and everything else sort of aligns with whom I'm about to partner with.
Yeah, because you don't want a jarring experience for the client. So there has to be some alignment there. Okay.
I think another biggest part is getting client feedback. I think, Mr. Client, you saw X, Y, and Z financial planner. How was your experience with him? Did you find that of value, or did he add any value to your situation? And I think getting that feedback firstly from the client is very, very important. From the one or two leads, and I think then you can determine, I think, the rest of the part of this structure to go, how you would want to work with that mortgage broker or advisor.
Which lends itself to what you brought up earlier, Anja. You get bad feedback. So how do you manage that?
Again, I think you set expectations around it. It's natural over the course of time you will have the good feedback and the bad feedback. It's about how you handle those feedback and give the customer the assurance of going, well, if something has gone wrong, how do you go about fixing it? And how do you go about remediating it and providing the seamless experience to go, yes, things have gone wrong, but we'll do this, this, and this to fix your problem.
Because it affects the client, but it affects the trust of the professional relationship too if the feedback isn't quite so solid. Any traps? So we were talking about tips. And I might go over to you again, Anja, because you mentioned you've seen relationships that didn't really work. Is there any kind of common themes or things that jumped out where you went, I can see why it didn't work because of this. This is the thing that didn't work, or anything that comes to mind?
So probably going back to sort of more previous organisations or experiences as well. I think a lot of it does come down to what I spoke about, which is setting clear expectations up front, being able to regularly communicate. I think two issues around feedback or things not going as you would expect it. I think there's points where you can have a point easy conversation, and sometimes the longer you leave it can be point hard, point difficult, point impossible as well. So I think, what I would say is what I've seen is maybe brokers haven't stepped into that conversation where the referral relationship didn't actually meet their expectations. And then it's just sort of like, no, we've just got to cut it, which, it just didn't meet expectations. Now, I'm not saying every relationship's going to work outstandingly. We know it doesn't happen in life, but what are the steps you can take to be really clear with each other, to be really clear around that client experience from start to finish? I think you've got a good chance of success. And success is actually that the client gets the most out of the partnership that you're working in.
Yeah. So sometimes what I'm hearing a little bit is some of it might be rushing into it in the sense that there wasn't that clear communication or that structure. You you got excited and go, let's refer, but maybe some of that groundwork might not have been there. Would be a thing that would make it slide. And then sometimes, and I know, if you've got a very successful broking business, very successful financial planning business, I do know the level of volume we're looking at Ryker as well. You can make yourself too busy to maintain the relationship and work on the relationship, which goes into the personal too, but is very valid in business as well. Getting too busy to succeed in that relationship. Can I pivot to risk management, insurance, managing people's personal risk? I know you and I were talking about as part of. I wouldn't mind getting your comments, your perspective on people's personal risk as part of the lending process. What is your view on that? And it's going to probably vary from, I guess, aggregator to aggregator, what their, compliance expectations are, and making sure, their clients have their personal risk management or they're taking on a big loan contract. Could you unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah, so I think there's a variety of different models that brokers may choose to opt into or not as well. I think the connection of, from what I've seen, the connection of risk advice to the lending decision, it's not as mature in Australia as what we see in overseas markets, and I can talk about that a little bit more. So I think we get models where a broker may straight refer to an advisor. They may be an authorised rep with some insurance providers as well, to provide very limited advice under that licence, which is obviously monitored and managed by that licensee. I spoke about my broker who wears dual hats as well. But what we find is many brokers, just that, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, but some of the feedback I've gotten is that just that extension of going, okay, now I'm a broker and now I'm going to put another hat on and I'm going to extend. It's probably not always a natural fit as well. And then I think we see the relationship that we've been speaking a lot about today, which is working with in a business partnership relationship overall. I think the thing that's really interesting with Australia, and you might have some statistics around this, culturally it's not a thing to just go and get an insurance. I know I've got insurance in my super, with my financial planner, I've got all the necessary insurances and all that sort of stuff. But I speak to many other of my sort of friends, and it's not a natural thing. The thing that's really interesting in the UK, and the reason I reference the UK, it's culturally we're quite similar as countries. Mortgage broking's been around there quite a while. Mortgage brokers facilitate something like 80% of mortgages in the UK, and we look to it as a sort of forward trajectory. It's a very common practice when a consumer goes and gets a mortgage that they have the insurance conversation at the same time. And it's actually integrated, and again, not an expert, but the regulatory framework facilitates that in some respects, and it's expected. So I've spoken to brokers who've come to Australia from the UK, and they're like, we're really surprised Australians don't have this conversation. So I don't know if you've got any stats around, am I right? Are Australians underinsured?
Dean and I were talking, and I don't know if we were talking about a recent statistic, and there's something like, from my understanding, and perhaps you can speak to it, that really, so we're very fortunate here, we've got the superannuation system. And I know that as a retirement kind of system, that really is one of the leading world things in the world, that kind of a setup. There's often something in our superannuations where people can get something that we refer to as default insurance cover. So you open up your superannuation account, particularly if you're aligned with an employer, and you've got some default cover. And you and I were talking about that really, if you look at what that default cover is, let's say a certain amount of life insurance, it doesn't even really touch the sides of covering even your average mortgage that a person has, let alone anything else.
Well, when I was doing a bit of research for
you said you were going to do some research.
I did a bit of research. I couldn't get anything too up to date, but I found that people on average, their life cover amount was roughly around about 143,000 in super. Now, if you look at, traditionally speaking, now what our average mortgage is, tend to be around
It's
about
probably a bit more than that.
Right?
It's about
So
Yeah, it's a lot more. It's a lot more than that.
People are under the perception that if anything happens to me, I've got cover in my super fund, I'll be okay. But the reality behind that, when you unpack it and understand what it actually looks like, a lot of the time it's actually not enough.
Yeah. But not to mention, Dean, further to that some of these default insurance are so dangerous because they're riddled with a lot of pre-existing health conditions, exclusions in them.
Yeah,
so when you sort of start to really unpack this insurance, you read the PDS on them, you go, oh my God, it's not going to cover all of these conditions. So if I have something that is pre-existing that could be linked to that, I might not get a payout. The other part that I found that so funny was some of these super funds. I'm paying for a cover. My premium goes up, but my cover goes down. So if I started with $200,000, I've now ended up at 45 years of age at $110,000. I'm like, how does that work?
So this is the insurance within
This
the
is the
Within the
default.
default.
Yeah.
It's like, my mind boggles and going, well, okay, if it's like me paying an insurance company to not pay me for anything. So that's why the conversation at that level needs to be, with a mortgage broker and a financial planner, needs to be so crucial, because most of these clients are under the belief system that they are paying for it, but am I paying for the right thing? Will I get paid out? Or am I going to be locked into some of the pre-existing conditions and go, sorry, there's no payout?
So really not only, so definitely yes, under insurance, but also not really probably appropriate or insurance you can claim on either. And then I think people get mixed up in workers' compensation.
Yes.
Because they kind of think, oh, well, there's workers' compensation that I could claim on.
Yeah.
But that again is something that's very specific to something that happens to you while you're working. So, there is
Correct.
kind of that misconception that there's insurance, but it's not really the insurance that people think it is.
And that is a
either.
massive myth around that obviously I'll get paid from workers' compensation. Workers' compensation usually is around, I think from memory, approximately goes for about 2 years or so, and stops there.
So it's very much that way. So no, you're right about that. And so that's very interesting that there is that different, even though we're culturally very similar to the UK, that specifically is quite different from, when a broker comes here. How are you finding with members? Are you getting feedback on, having a change in comfort or greater comfort, or maybe since the change in the compliance kind of regime? Is there any difference from there? Or how are brokers here having those conversations about risk?
So I think it goes along the lines of what I was saying before. It'll depend. I spoke about this sort of concept of confidence and where it is in the conversation with their client, actually what they can and can't do based on their referral relationships as well. Philosophically, my comment around underinsurance, I think it probably sits potentially in the same bucket as financial literacy in Australia.
I think you're right about that.
And I think when you've got professions and, experts, and it's sort of how a client can access those services and actually be prompted to sort of say, have you thought about it?
Have you thought about it?
So you're taking on, obviously you're going to be taking on a debt of X. I can't talk to you about life insurance. Because it's not my job. However,
these are some things you might want to think. So that sounds like there's probably a big case to be made on that financial literacy as two professional partners. How do you, help the client with that literacy so they can kind of be, oh, okay, I now know why I might want to investigate this as a start. So is there do you do a lot of work with brokers?
We do a lot of work
piece?
on the literacy piece, Tamara, but also traditionally when I was working with brokers before, they were using something of a mechanism that was internally promoted by the aggregator channel at that point in time to take that insurance internally that's provided. However, the ramification, what we saw with some of these internal insurances was when it came time to claim, ultimately the client had gone to the mortgage broker and he just doesn't know how to handle the claim part of the process and what those insurance stood for and what are some of the underlying policy definitions that didn't pay out the customer. So ultimately it held mortgage broker responsible to go, well, hang on a second, you've gave me this policy, but it doesn't pay me out. So it's obviously the education, the literacy piece, there's a massive work around that piece to go, knowing your product and obviously whatever product you're recommending for the insurance to the client, that's got to match the client's needs and wants and some of the health part that they want to cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I might stick on that too, because I'm really big on financial literacy as well. And too, I think, Dean, I know that you organize, because you've got a lot of mortgage broking referral partners. You sometimes do webinars or presentations where predominantly you're talking about, what do I do as a broker? What do I do as a financial advisor? And a lot of that is financial literacy for the end client audience, isn't it?
Correct. So a lot of the time it's talking about and unpacking, okay, what are the key themes? What are the key things that we're seeing within the market at the moment now, and what that all looks like? And what are the potential issues that we're finding as well? So, and how can we work towards and helping our clients? I think a lot of the time, and I think everyone's been saying this, which is very, very true, the financial literacy for a lot of clients, it's unfortunately sometimes it's not always there. And we're the trusted partners, and also the broker as well, as we've got that trusted relationship to be able to then help them to get them and guide them to where they want to be. So
I think the literacy piece is huge, and for really when you're partnering with a business, that's probably a ground zero, and how you can build on that literacy conversation, whether you come from a mortgage broker first and you're introduced to a financial advisor, or you've come to a financial advisor first and going the other way to a mortgage broker, really understanding how that interplay goes and what my thought process is, and why I would use different services for different things, and how they mesh together as a client experience as well.
Yeah. One of the things as well that I like doing, especially with a new referral relationship, is if they've sent through their first client through to me to obviously to have a chat with, I'd love to get them to join the meeting. So then it does a few things. So it allows them to understand the type of service that we give, but at the same time as well, it helps them understand as well, okay, what we do in advice, how we help clients, and how we service the clients as well. And what are the key things that we look out for as well, and how we unpack those conversations with the clients. So it tends to be a good experience off the back of it.
It gives them a great understanding of the financial planning process and what it's about, and how it sort of really enhances that client's financial well-being.
Well, I think vice versa as well, because I know I've worked with financial advisors who, with the permission again of the mortgage broker, if they referred, can they sit in some of the process as well, and really understanding the same thing. How does the mortgage broker approach it? What is that process? And that helps with client experience, right? And it helps mesh up those processes, so you don't have process shock or client experience shock when you're experiencing one thing here and one thing over there, and it helps you design as business partners how that should be then. Which I think is what you brought up as well, too. And also, too, maintaining client relationship. I really want to drill into that. I know that you do a lot of feedback with your broker partner referrals about the value add to the client in the financial planning space. Could you kind of unpack that a little bit and why you do that? I guess what you do and why you do that.
Okay, so many years ago, I used to be a banker. So I used to work within the banks, and I used to refer back then as well to some stuff, whether it's to a mortgage broker or to one of the lenders back then, or even the financial planner. And one of the things that I really disliked was that when I was refer something across, I wouldn't hear anything off the back of it. What happened to it? Where is that at? And all that type of stuff. So one of the things that I personally do is when any opportunity or I'm referred any clients, I then communicate directly with the referral partner, whether that be to say I've tried to contact the client, or whether that to be to say as well. And then once I've actually contacted the client and we've held the meeting, I'll give the referral partner a bit of a rundown on what the meeting was about and what we actually covered and what their advice needs are. And then I'll follow up again with them once we've gone through and completed the advice. And this is where the value really is, where we talk about the actual value that I gave the client, whether that's money that we've saved within a super, whether that's protecting them, whether that's giving simple strategies to increase their super balance so that they're pretty much updated and they know what's going on from start to finish. But at the same time as well, they can see and understand and see the value that we've been able to give the client and how we've actually been able to help them.
And I think that communication is really good for the referral relationships, and vice versa as well. When you're referring to the broker too, how do they add value exactly and precisely to small business owners? Where it can be harder to get a loan. If you're doing any intergenerational, lending, and somebody's going guarantor, really understanding as a financial advisor, what those specifics of the case are too, because then you can recognize, I think, as a business partner, I know I've seen this client, this is a similar scenario, I know where we can add value, and I know where I'm taking this referral relationship then as well. So I think unpacking that, particularly when you're in your first 6 months, year, 2 years of that partner relationship, is really, really important. That's the maintaining the relationship and really making sure you're recognizing potential client outcomes, and then you can actually deliver on it by making those introductions really, really well.
No, exactly.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate all of your comments today. And thank you, Anja, for coming for 2 episodes with us. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks once again. Thank you.
Thank you.